welcome in to episode 24 of the Next Stage podcast. I'm your host, Rob Stout. I am really excited that you're with us today. We are coming to the conclusion of a series that we've been in called Freedom from Parm, and that is Parmesan cheese. It is such an epidemic throughout this country. We've got to end the parm problem in this country. Psych, just kidding. Dan, our guest, and I were just sitting talking about that. I misspelled a word and it said freedom from parm, and I'm like, that is an epidemic as well. But we are in a series called Freedom from Porn. And it has been if you've been with us over this last several episodes, taking a look at this issue of pornography in men's lives and how it affects your lives, really the passion, purpose, power, and perspective of your life. I would encourage you to go back, take a look at these episodes we've done. They've been really in the 360 of your life, every avenue that we could think to pursue, including the spiritual core of your life and how that is affected and how this issue impacts your life. For some men, it's not porn. It's something else. It's gambling. It's eating. It's alcohol, it's tobacco, it's whatever. But really the reality of taking a look at an issue in your life that has you trapped and how to move past that is really what we've been after. So if this has been meaningful for you, I would encourage you to pass this on to a friend, pass this on to another man in your life. I know small groups who are getting together and listening to this and reviewing it and using some of the online resources that we have. And if you are after any of those, please email me, thenextstage@sherpa5280.com. But today, I would like to continue what we started in our last episode, and that is with a really good friend, one of the key men in my life, in a very close circle with me, and that is my friend Dan Foote. He joined us on our last episode 23, and he's back in all of his glory, great beard and all. But welcome, Dan.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so good we had to do it twice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. We actually had to do it on a different day.
We actually had to do it on a different day. We weren't wearing the same shirt. Yeah, exactly. But very briefly, Dan, if you'll just give some of your background and a little bit of what you bring to the table.
I've always had a heart and a passion for men. I was raised in a very patriarchal home. My dad was deeply involved in men's ministry in the church we grew up in. So, I mean, I've been going to men's retreats and stuff since I was, preteen. Mm-hmm. So, and then, then going into ministry, serving at Flatirons Community Church. And I've recently retired from full-time ministry and trying to decide what I'm going to be when I grow up now. Yeah,
I gotcha.
I work as a bride, but yeah, I still have a heart for men, and have a deep care and concern for these men, for men who just get lost in the isolation and in their own brokenness. And the first go-to is almost always, I'm just going to isolate, right?
Right.
And so.
And then they get destructive in that space.
Sure. Yeah, it's easy.
Absolutely.
That's an easy path to get destructive by yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today, what we're digging into is one of my core passions, and that is community. We started this podcast on episode 1. It was called "Don't Go It Alone," and the reality is, Dan, that many, many, many men go it alone.
Yeah.
They isolate, like you said, they go it alone. And with that comes a lot of problems. Yeah. In your life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think that first of all, still we live in a different cultural day and time. But I think there's still that part of like a man has to be strong and has to be, the person who always has the answers to whatever issue.
Right.
Part of that, I personally believe that we're hardwired. Most of us are hardwired that way. And then we grow up in environments where fathers are trying to raise boys into men. And a lot of, past upbringing comes around that, You got to be strong. And you got to fake it to make it a lot of times. And when you're faking it to make it, you can't show anybody the struggles you're having, right?
Right.
So then, you isolate.
Yeah.
And whatever relationships you do have, they stay at a surface level where you never disclose your real struggles that you're having.
Right.
And it's hard to find a safe community to do that, right?
Well, absolutely. And so speaking to that, a lot of men have men that they know, but how many men have men that know them?
Oh, yeah.
And how does that get a man in trouble in his life? He's out there, he's trying to figure it out. Perhaps, and I did this week at work. I called another cohort of mine, a partner of mine in our business, and I just said, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you share with me what's happening?" Well, that took a lot for me to talk with somebody who was on my level and just go, "I don't know. You're really good at this. I need your help."
Right.
But we do that. We're like, we fake it till we make it. What happens when a man does that? What are some of the results in his life?
Well, first of all, there's that isolation piece. We talked the last time, I said that, this brokenness that we carry, we're all broken. We're, as people of faith, we're told that all have sinned, and we're separated from, we separate ourselves from God that way. We also separate ourselves from community and stuff because we don't want to be seen as weak. I think this is part of the, probably at the heart of this. No man wants to be seen as weak.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was saying earlier, just like we got to be strong. We have to have all the answers. We have to be the person you go to. And we can fake that for a little while. And then when you start talking about some of these destructive issues, we're talking about, this podcast series has been about porn. But like you said, that's not every man's struggle.
Right.
I mean, it's every man's battle in some way, but it's not every guy's Achilles heel.
Right. Right.
Like you said, some of it's food, alcohol. Mm-hmm. We live in a culture where how many young men, this kind of stereotype of a young man living in his parents' basement playing games, sitting around vaping. We heard that a lot during this last election, the presidential election we just went through.
Right.
I mean, there is so these danger areas, they breed like we talked about last time, they breed like mushrooms in the dark.
Yeah.
Keep it in the dark. That is, separate from it. Don't let anybody else speak any light into it. Don't let anybody see what's happening. That is a great place to destroy yourself.
Right. Right. So a man gets in that trap. He then has results in his own life. How does that fall out? How does that land on the other people around him? Wives, kids, coworkers.
So you're talking about the primary focus for your series here is about porn. Mm-hmm. Well, porn is so destructive, and again we live in a day and time where people laugh it off. It's just a minor thing. It's a lark.
Right.
It's harmless. Well, it's not. No, it's not. I mean, what that does is, the truth is this: what you experience in porn, one of the primary areas that we are experiencing today with young men who have been exposed to pornography for so long. Well, there's not only just that emotional detachment.
Right.
You don't know what it's like to be with a flesh and blood person. Most of your time is spent with the screen, and forgive me, with your own hand, right? And so you have that. But then there is the scientific piece of this. Mm-hmm. All those endorphins. There's no woman that can live up to that.
Right.
And so you have so many young men stepping into marriage and relationships unable to connect in that emotional, real intimate way, not just physical, but they're intimate with a computer,
Right.
and no woman can live up to that.
Yeah.
So you're on a very, precarious place in a relationship with a young man with a woman, or it isn't just young men, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're in a precarious place because you can no longer be intimate.
Right.
With him. Your intimacy is damaged. So there's that.
Right. Well, in one of our previous episodes, we had my son-in-law, Cody Holland, who is he's going into his residency in psychiatry.
Yeah.
Did some research. That hit of porn on your brain is ranking up there with a cocaine hit.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
that's how powerful it is.
Well,
right?
yeah, and really, everything in its place, right? This is the way we were created.
Right.
We're supposed to enjoy this.
We're supposed to have that high.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But what we've done with technology and with the inundation of all of these innovations around this, it takes it to a different place that it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it is detrimental. And there's, and the people that make, like I said, you look at media, you look at television, Hollywood, they make fun of it. And is that a community that mirrors a life that you want? No.
No. And the more we find out about it, the answer is hell no.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, when you isolate, you cut off any ability to, number one, be honest with somebody else, which is what that in turn makes it easy to lie to ourselves, right? If you can't be honest with somebody else, you're not going to be honest with yourself either.
Right.
So there's that place, and the more isolated you become, the easier it becomes for these just destructive habits to take over.
Right.
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 I mean, that's one of the things that we both have seen over the years, whether it's in ministry or just personal relationships with friends,
Right. Absolutely.
family, whatever. I mean, there is one place that this goes, and it is to destruction if you don't take care of it.
Right. So, men, we have been down this road talking about the problem. And here's the thing. There is a lot at stake in our lives. And we have taken a look at the isolation side. We've taken a look at the brain chemistry side. We've taken a look at the connection between pornography and the sex industry. We've taken a look at all of this stuff. And yet there is a component that is a solution piece to this. And that is this area of community, which kind of sounds pretty soft. But it is way different than that. And I'm hoping the direction that our conversation goes here takes your understanding of this and your appetite to go get some of this in your life to a different level. And Dan, you're a man who is in my tight community. I would say, you know enough to send me to prison, but I don't think I've done anything that bad. Knows a lot about my life. You have access to my life. And I bring things to our group of men that very few know.
Yeah.
And very few should know.
Yes.
Because my life is not just a smorgasbord for, hey, here I am. And, I live emotionally naked or, just exposed to the world.
Yeah.
Not at all. But Dan is one of these men in my life. And I guess starting personally for you, how has community, not just your leadership in it, but your participation in it, affected your life in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, what I've experienced, and I said I look back now, and you know this. I mean, my dad's still alive, but in late stage stuff. There's no perfect dads, but he was a really good example. Showed that by example that he had men in his life. And I said again, being involved in men's ministry as a lay leader throughout most of my life, there was that. So I was able to see I was given a good example of what that looked like. But then personally for myself, I mean, I don't know where I would be without that community. I mean, again, you know, there's that innate part of us that wants to hide, that wants to hide any foibles, you know, any issues or struggles that we have. We want to hide that from people, right? And we can keep distant relationships. We can keep them at an arm's length, and we can have buddies, but we don't have friends.
So let me ask you a question. Let's go down that It's a Wonderful Life side of things. If you were to take that element of your life out and go back to whatever age and pursue life, what would you imagine your life looking like without that element?
Oh, man. I mean, first of all, I look at that and I see myself in multiple relationships or marriages. I don't see the benefit of children, you know, living in the safety of an environment where they see, you know, as healthy as we can all be, a healthy relationship between their parents and stuff. I mean, there's so much fallout that comes when relationships break.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why. One of the things, you know, people are so quick to, you know, well, you know, God says in the Bible that he hates divorce. Well, keep reading that whole section.
Right.
Why does it? Because he wants holy offspring. And what does that mean? That word holy gets, you know, thwarted and twisted.
Very churchy.
Yeah. But what do you want? Because the truth is this: God doesn't want divorce because it damages children. It's that simple. I don't know of a single person who has lived, either been divorced or lived through a divorce, that they aren't hurt and damaged in some way. And they're making up. Not that you can redeem anything, right? As long as you, again, but I go back to this community piece. And you asked, what would my life be like?
Yeah.
Oh, I shudder to think about that. You know, I'm at a stage in life, you know, where I got so much more in the rearview mirror than I do in the windshield ahead. And one of the things that we have talked about personally off of this, but I'll share that here, is just like the joy that comes from a life well lived. Meaning that Amy and I have had our ups and downs. We had some serious struggles and all that. We have great kids. They're not perfect kids. We've got 6 grandkids now. I mean, I look at this, when you ask me if I would have just unraveled at the age of 25, you're 26, 30 years old, in that period, which can be really dangerous.
Right.
I wouldn't have this. And now we're at this point in life where we're able to look back and reflect and look at that.
Right.
There's all kinds of brokenness in that. But the blessing, again, of a life well lived together, that gets deeply damaged when you invite your heart and your life to be consumed and taken over through this, you know, this porn and unhealthy, this unhealthy approach to sex as opposed to a healthy one.
Absolutely. You brought up so many things there. The divorce side of things, of course. I mean, we've got very near and dear people.
Yeah.
I've got family members who walk through that, and nobody would say, you know what? I'm untouched by that.
Right.
On the other hand, I know a lot of people who are just developing horrible marriages, and that damages us as well, right?
Yeah.
But the point being, we were made to experience community, and you were blessed to see a dad who modeled that.
Yeah.
Imperfectly? Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Did you model perfectly?
No.
No. Is Ben modeling it perfectly?
I was going to say, I got a kid that goes around the country talking about how he screwed up all the time.
Oh, yeah. You give him good fodder, man.
That's right.
Build his career.
Yeah.
He should pay you some type of dividend for that.
But, you know, we've got a mutual friend, our buddy Scott Nickel, our friend Scott Nickel, who's out in, you know, used to be the teaching pastor here in Colorado at Flatirons, and now he's out in Southland in Kentucky. And I mean, that's something that he said. He goes, I used to tell people, I don't think I was damaged by my parents' divorce. And he has completely turned, he's seen it,
Right.
And a lot of times you don't experience that without a little time, without a little, distance to reflect and process through that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so I just want to say, in no way am I saying that divorce is the end of everything.
No.
But there is damage that comes from it. And I don't think anybody who's being honest would say that there isn't.
Absolutely. What it does, it hits you at the connection level.
Yeah.
And getting back to this issue of pornography and being able to connect, you're right, man. There's no way a human being is going to live up to something on a screen, airbrushed, filtered, paid. I mean, like, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So the living in community and having a life that's shared in community, specifically with other men, how is that a strength giver in a man's life? What does it do in him that is so valuable?
Well, I can't remember if we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We did the other one, so forgive me. We can. There was something that happened, and it happened in this situation with my own son, where when I was at Flatirons, I did a podcast. I asked my son Ben to come on, and before we talked about, there were these two major things that I felt like I did with him as a father, so kind of like to really speak into his life as he grew into a man. Mm-hmm. The first one was when he turned 13, I did a special, I called it a Christian bar mitzvah,
right,
where I just had, there were none of his friends there. It was just men that were part of his life because they were part of my life. Right. So I had the men in my community. I asked, my father came, so he walked in not realizing it was a surprise birthday party, and the surprise was also that he was in the company of men.
He was coming into the circle.
Right.
Yep.
So there was that. And then I also, before he went off to college, we hiked for 2 weeks on the Appalachian Trail. And we talked about those two events. And what I'm going to get to is this. What really stood out to me, and it didn't come out in the podcast, it came out when we talked beforehand. He told me about, and I said, like, which one of those two was most important? Like, that you, like, now that you're 30 years old, like, right, which one of these? And he was like, well, he said that the gathering of men, I called it, his 13th birthday party. He said, I knew it was special at the time, but it didn't resonate with me.
Didn't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, I knew in the moment when we hiked the Appalachian Trail that was important. And he said, but the thing about the gathering of men was there were times after that. This is what he told me later. There were times after that party, as he moved from 13 into 15 and 18, where he said that where he was tempted to do something. Mm-hmm. And he said, what was in the back of my head was, I don't want to disappoint the men in that room.
Yeah.
There's the power. And it comes to inviting or being invited into a community where you're going to be held responsible.
Yeah.
We live as broken humans trying to shirk the responsibility from our mistakes and decisions. Mm-hmm. We live in a time and a culture, a place where seems like nobody takes responsibility for the mistakes and issues. We write them off, and and we've got no fault divorce, and so when you're in a community, if you open yourself up to, as a man, to put yourself in a safe community, I can't stress safe enough. Mm-hmm. Put yourself in a safe community. What ends up happening, and we talked about this the last time, you can't hold me accountable.
Right. Right.
I mean, we'd have to live with each other 24/7. It's like nobody. But what we can do is invite somebody to hold us accountable to some of these things and to ask hard questions. And that's, right. I mean, we met this morning at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And we share our lives. And we open ourselves up to the accountability of others.
Yeah.
And there's power in that. There's power in that. I just keep, like I said, that what Ben told me 6, 7, 8 years ago after that podcast. I didn't want to disappoint the men in that room.
Mm-hmm.
I have that. You have that. There are things that I don't do. And honestly, it's like, yes, there's the men in that room.
Yep.
The other thing, too, is I don't want to disappoint not only my wife, I don't want to disappoint my kids,
Right.
their spouses, my grandkids.
Yep.
And it's still, I mean, yeah, I'm almost 65. I can still blow my world up.
You can blow it up.
I'm 5 minutes away from we all are, right?
We need to wrap this up then.
Okay.
So, because we only have 4 minutes.
Yeah, I got some singing to do.
But you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dan, really, there are two issues that you're talking about there. You're talking about the macro community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about my life. I think about the guy that comes to mind was my dad's friend, John Cleveland. John, big old guy, a veteran, just leader, so many good things about him. One of my first jobs was working on his framing crew. He went and started a custom home building business, and I worked summers from him. And he knew he hired another guy, and one of their things was to just speak into our lives.
Yeah.
And I remember the voice of John. It was my dad's voice too, but there were these other men.
Yeah.
And I had this memory. A friend of mine, Bart, handed me a picture of my friend Dallas.
Yeah.
The picture he had of the two of us. This week, and Dallas passed away a couple months ago, and so I've got this picture in my office, and I just started taking inventory of the men in my life.
Yeah.
Going back from a young age, and there were many. And it was living up to a standard.
Yeah.
Now I know none of them were perfect, and I know things about them now that, I wish I could have known at that time. I've been like, well, he wasn't that good. I would have done that anyway. But there were men that I was like, my pastor, coaches, other men who brought the standard up.
Yeah.
And just said, hey, live in this, And like as a society, it seems like we've taken that standard and lowered it so far, thrown it away, and then actually paraded an entire another value system.
Yeah.
So there's a macro community, and then there's the micro community, the small places where a man can cultivate.
Yeah.
Where he can live, where he can have continuity and consistency of that.
Yeah. The other thing too is like that micro community. I think there's seasons to it. Mm-hmm. A lot of that's dictated by geography. We're so mobile these days. We move across the country, and jobs take us to different places. But so I mean, there's that. But then it's like I've always kind of categorized it this way, and I do believe. Again, as people of faith, we look at Jesus going, how did Jesus do this? And, Jesus had thousands of people following him. At one point, we read that he, fed 5,000 men, and there's
probably 20 grand, 20,000 people. Yep, absolutely. In the flock of people.
He had, he sends out the 72, These are disciples. These are people that are following him. Mm-hmm. And then he's got what we always refer to as the 12. Mm-hmm. And amongst those 12, he's got 3, Peter, James, and John, that are his closest. Yeah. And of those 3, we're told John is the one that is his best friend. Yeah. That's how, again, our faith and our trust are in what we read in the Word. That's how God in the flesh lived it out. And I do believe that I found in my life, and I think you can agree, we have all kinds of associates, people that we're, men, and we're talking to men. So we have all kinds of associates, people that we know. We probably have, I know a bunch of buddies.
Yeah.
But I have few friends.
And I have even fewer confidants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and I think there's something to that. And what that is, there's this level of dropping that vulnerability guard.
Right.
There are, like you said, in our group on Fridays, there are things that are shared in that you don't share that with just anybody.
And that's one of the agreements.
Right.
And men are confronted if they do.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't share that with just everybody. I mean, all your close people and there's a reason why. It's part of, again, I do believe it's part of being safe in community and staying strong within that safe,
Right.
And when that gets damaged, it's damaged, right?
Right. Absolutely.
You can heal it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Last question. How does a man, a normal guy, and I want to talk about Sherpa freedom groups, but it is so much farther than that. How does a man cultivate that in his life? How does he find that? And I've talked to a lot of men. Let me throw this caveat in there before I answer the question.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of men like, "Well, I just don't know." And would you do that for me? I'm like, no, that's your responsibility as a man to do that.
Yeah.
So given that, how do you do that? How have you done that?
Okay, this is
Not
me.
programmatically.
No, I'm speaking from the heart.
Yep.
There are just people that I connect with and people I don't. I used to carry a lot of guilt around that, going like, "Oh, I feel guilty because no, I ain't nobody got time for that."
Right. Not anymore.
No. And so I think that here's what I do know. And again, the day and culture we live in, you look at the explosion of the podcast, the TED Talks, and all self-help stuff is through the roof. Young people especially are looking for mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all kinds of avenues to find them.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to go to a TED Talk or watch a TED Talk or go to some conference and some speaker and you get their book and all that. It's another. You got to find somebody that sits like you and I are right now, looking eye to eye, and we share our deepest struggles so that we can hold each other to some form of accountability to get better.
Well, and also in that, not only accountability, but encouragement.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about my podcast, about your book, your publishing, your writing.
Yeah.
And just going, man, go do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need a man in our life who just can breathe wind into our sails. Like, it's okay. Or talking to a younger man and going, I get it. I've been there.
Yeah. But I do believe in this kind of unspoken, this enigmatic piece of connecting with people.
Yeah.
And, first of all, there's this story. I won't go into all the details. There's this story in the Bible of a young king that he gets the kingdom and he's like, what are you going to, what do you do? Well, and he gets the advice, why don't you go to your father's counsel, he's wise counsel. And he doesn't. He goes to his buddies.
Right.
And his buddies are like, you're the king now. You don't have to listen to anybody. And he blows the kingdom up, right? So I think there's finding people maybe with a little more life experience under their belt that for a young person to look for. But I can't stress enough, and it's intangible.
Yeah.
You either connect with someone or you don't.
Right. But it's pursuing that, and it's pursuing it the way you do in
Yes.
hunger. And here's the thing. We were made for that. Mm-hmm. Like, God designed us for that. Oh, as people who connect. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's really deep.
Yeah.
But I think the point is to take responsibility for that area of your life and just pursue it.
It doesn't just happen.
Right.
I'll tell you what does just happen. As we led this thing off with, if you don't protect yourself, if you aren't proactive around this part of your life, these base habits and destructive behaviors will take over.
Yeah.
And you will not be the man that you want to be.
Yeah.
And it will lead to failure here and there, whether it's relational. Some of this stuff gets so out of hand. It's, and we all know there's some stories out there where people their lives unravel.
Right.
And they end up everything from completely isolated to in prison.
Right.
So.
Right. Or they slowly unravel.
Yeah.
And they just live a life of quiet desperation. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
It means a lot.
Thank you.
And this man is a man that I love. I respect. He's a brother and a friend. And so thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Man, the point that I wanted to make with my good friend Dan is that we were created for community. And without community, men settle for mediocrity in their life. My call to action for you is this: pursue this in your life. Pursue community in your life. It may be with just taking a conversation to the next level. It may be with the guy that you play golf with or fish with or play basketball with. Just taking it to the next level intentionally. Doesn't happen by accident, but just take it to the next level. The other thing, and we've been talking about this very specifically, is I want to invite you into a community where you can work on your life. And that is with what we've created called Sherpa Freedom Groups. I'm going to let Chris tell you about it right now as an application for this entire series to be able to bring community into this area of your life to see transformation for you.
Man, are you tired of the struggle you know is holding you back? And I mean at the bone and marrow level of your soul. Hey guys, this is Chris, one of the producers at the Next Stage podcast for men. Your struggle could be an addiction to pornography, or it might be something else like drinking or eating, gambling, whatever. And you've heard Rob talk a lot about this. Recovery starts when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. This struggle is taking its toll on your life and holding you back from quality relationships with your wife, your kids, and those you care about. Your struggle is also like a heavy ball and chain, weighing down your career and even your life purpose. If you're not sick and tired of being sick and tired, you're probably not ready for what I'm talking about here. But if you are seriously stinking sick and tired of being sick and tired, then I want to challenge you to join a Sherpa Freedom Group. So what's a Sherpa Freedom Group? Well, we're not just talking about white-knuckling this thing. We're talking about understanding why we have this struggle. We're talking about how to overcome it. We're talking about understanding what makes a man's passion, purpose, power, and perspective. And then we're doing the hard work together of transforming in men who are in control, not being controlled. And we're doing this in community, not in isolation. We're calling and emailing and texting and Zooming and personally meeting when possible, sending smoke signals, whatever it takes to personally connect and help each other accomplish what we all want. Wives who respect and trust us. Children who don't fear us. Employers and clients who can rely on us. We're putting together a Sherpa Freedom Group, and we want you on board. Go to Sherpa5280.com/Sherpa Freedom Groups right now and register for your spot today while they last. Again, Sherpa5280.com/Sherpa Freedom Group, or check out the show notes for the link. This will pay off not only for you, but for the people in your life that matter most. Aren't you all worth it? Men, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Are you?
Thanks for that, Chris. Man, this is a resource we've created just for you. I encourage you to check it out at Sherpa5280.com/Sherpa Freedom Groups. The verse from Scripture that I want to leave you with today is really the fundamental building block of this episode, and it is timeless. It was written so long ago. It's in a book called Proverbs. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." I took a picture of my best friend in college, who was my best friend at my wedding and one of my best friends today, and that is Andy. I took a picture of us when we were 20 years old, a picture of us in college, just arm around each other, and I gave that to him as a graduation present. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Who are the men or the man that is in your life to encourage you and to sharpen you? Finally, the next stage is brought to you by a great team of people. I appreciate Mike and Chris and Andy and Marcus for all of their work. I'm your host, Rob Stout. We're here every 2 weeks. We release one of these episodes. If it's meant something to you, please pass this on. I would invite you to hit that reminder button. Give us a 5-star rating on YouTube or whatever channel you access this on. If you've got a question, I would love to interact with you. Reach out to me at the next stage at Sherpa5280.com. And until next time when we get together, go be a man who summits life climb and be awesome in your world today. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.